come again and see new friends and old friends and what's happening here in Dallas with all those cowboys that you mentioned in reading. Your fall weather is more like summer where I live in Seattle. It's quite pleasant, actually. So tomorrow, September 30th, is the birth commemoration of Lahiri Mahashaya in the year 1828, nearly 200 years ago. And he really set for this path a pattern for the so-called New Age, for what is called Dwapara Yuga, the age of energy, the age of individuality, age of self-respect, which is to say, rather than retire and escape from the world to find spirit, as in the medieval period and the years before us, now it is time to bring spirit to work. In the world, not of the world, but in the world. And he, therefore, though he was a great avatar and a great saint, was a householder, had a family, had children, had a job. My family and my first career job was that of an accountant, and he was an accountant, so he's particularly dear to my heart. But anyway, he was a great soul. He did community service. He helped establish a high school in Varanasi, for example, and meditation groups throughout Bengal. He was born near the Bangladesh border in that year, 1828. And when we just did the reading a minute ago, I love that, well, there's so many verses from the Bhagavad Gita that are dear to my heart, but it is better to die attempting your own dharma than to succeed doing someone else's. It reminds me of the simple fact in relationship to the first quote from the Bible when Jesus said to his disciples not to forbid those casting out devils or whatever the heck they were doing, because he who is not against me is for me. You know, people once believed the earth was flat. Millions of people believe certain things, whether it be in religion or politics and this and that. It doesn't mean that millions of people are correct. Each of us has to follow our own path, our own, what resonates with us. And thus it is the work of self-realization throughout the world, via Kriya Yoga especially, is certainly growing exponentially. But nonetheless, when you think in terms of millions of people and statistics and that kind of thing, here we are, somewhere in Richardson, I think, and a small group. You know, Master would say, Paramahansa Yogananda, who many of us address as Master, as our guru, he would say, I prefer a soul to a crowd. And then he said with a sort of a twinkle in his eye, but I love crowds of souls. So it's not easy sometimes. I remember, and after a long trip to India, when I thought I might find what I wanted when I was in my mid-20s, and coming back a little bit empty-handed spiritually, though I had a wonderful trip, don't get me wrong, it was life-changing, but it was only then that I found Paramahansa Yogananda, the autobiography of a yogi, and Swami Kriyananda, a dear friend and the founder of Ananda Worldwide. For myself, and I think for probably all of us gathered in a place like this, we're not so needful of, you might say, the endorsement of millions of people. You wouldn't be even here if you didn't have the strength, the courage, the inspiration, the intuition to follow your heart, to follow your path. The inner path is what's unfolding in the world today, as I've mentioned in my talks this weekend, as really a solution to the problems that humanity faces. We can't agree on anything, whether it's climate change or politics or you name it. We're never going to totally agree. But if we can talk respectfully, if we can come up with solutions, isn't that really all that matters? We could solve every problem there is on this planet. I think you probably could, and you could, and each one of us, why don't they talk to us, right? Solving the problem isn't the issue. It's not about reason. It's not about science. It's about the heart. And this is really the solution. In the path of yoga, in the Yoga Sutras, the very first verse of the Yoga Sutras is translated something like, and now we come to the practice of yoga. Well, our lineage, and I'm sure others as well, have interpreted that otherwise seemingly like a throwaway opening sentence to a book, a scripture, as having its importance in the word now. You wouldn't be here, I wouldn't be here if we hadn't gone through a journey that redirected us, not just inward, that's our path, but in a new direction. Because what great masters have said is that now means that we have been through a process, probably in many lives, but most of us only can barely, I can barely remember my birthday parties when I was a kid, so don't ask me to remember past lives, but certainly in this lifetime, we've gone through what Kapil, the so-called author of the Sankhya Darshana philosophy, if you will, describes why it is what's out there offered to us as human beings for ultimate happiness is fine as far as it goes. I don't necessarily want to be poor or unhealthy or whatever, but it's just not enough. It's fine to be successful, but it simply isn't enough. In Sankhya, in other words, Kapil describes how it is, why it is, the world, which is based on the principle of duality, will never be adequate. And so when we get to this point of wanting to go within, we've at least addressed, because no one can fully satisfactorily answer the question, why? Don't you remember maybe when you were a kid or a teenager or in college or whatever, asking why? Well, there is no satisfactory answer. Yogananda would said, when you know God, you can ask him. Get to meet the Creator and he'll answer all of your questions. But there are some interesting insights into it because we can't help but ask why. Swami Kriyananda came up with a little bit of his own answer to that I have found very helpful. And he said it's the nature of bliss, which in the Sanatana Dharma of India, God is described as Satchidanandam, ever-existing, immortal, ever-present, omniscient and conscious, superconscious, and ever-new bliss. That's what we're all seeking. And it's imagine, what if Titu there won the lottery, won $1 billion? I bet he'd be pretty excited, don't you think? I think he would be. But would he keep it a secret? No, of course not. He'd want to share it. If somebody, let's say a couple is wanting to conceive a child and the wife gets pregnant and so on, and they're all happy, we used to pass out cigars, but, well, I never did, but I smoked one once. Anyway, in other words, when you're happy, you want to share your happiness. In the Indian scriptures, it says that God created the world in an effort to answer the question, rather poor response in my humble opinion, but it said God created the world out of a desireless desire. Now, what the heck is a desireless desire? I ask you. Well, I came up with an answer to that of my own. There I was, a beautiful Saturday morning like yesterday was here in Dallas, nice cool breezes, and you didn't have any obligations that day, right? And you could read a book and go to a movie. Well, we used to go to movies prior to the pandemic, but anyway, you could call up a friend, go for a hike maybe. Are there places to hike in Dallas? Okay, we've got them in Seattle. And in other words, you could do any number of things. And you're not compelled to do any of them at all. You could be a couch potato, stay in your PJs or whatever. But you choose to maybe go out to dinner or lunch with a friend. That's a little bit like, that's my best shot at what a desireless desire is. Okay? But nonetheless, asking that question, why? You know, one of the greatest questions besides who am I, which I've talked a lot about this weekend, one of the other great questions related to it is, why do we suffer? You know, we can talk about God as being bliss all we want, but you don't have to go very far on this planet to see a great deal of suffering. Why? Why is it? Well, if you were nothing but bliss, and you had that impulse to expand it, to share it in some way, how would that work? What if we were always in the Garden of Eden, always blissful and happy? Does a fish know it swims in water? Would we know what happiness even was if we were always... I mean, if you concoct, as I'm sure every one of us has done at different points in our life, your perfect life, maybe it's health, maybe it's human love, I don't know, wealth, status, you name it, the usual suspects, how long would that keep you satisfied? If you retire, if Mike were to retire and get that little cabin by the ocean side or the riverside and, you know, with his fishing pole or something, you know, how long would Mike be satisfied? A couple of months maybe? He'd get restless and want to do something. You see, what we have here cannot function without the drama. Yogananda said, and it's in the book Essence of Self-Realization, this life has for its lesson the fact that it is but a drama. And it is a great drama, the greatest story ever told, as they say, of the life of Jesus, but the life of every one of us. And so it is that without the contrast, if we were somehow miserably happy, pardon them, we wouldn't even know it. Okay? The reason God doesn't talk to most people, Yoganandaji said, is because they just want to argue with him. And people don't go to heaven because they'd make it into hell. You know, they'd turn it into hell because of their own negativity, restlessness, dissatisfaction, and so forth. So this great drama that we have has to be this way. If you think of yourself as Shakespeare or some great author or something, you sit down to write the great American novel. This is a little chapter in my book that some of you might recognize. And you sit down to write that great American novel. Okay, great Spanish-Mexican novel. All right, whatever it is. I grew up in California, and the Spanish language and culture has always been dear to my heart. I've always felt very in tune with the culture there. But if you were to write that novel, what if it was, you know, perfect, everything was just great, the protagonist was born and educated and successful? What a boring novel. I mean, nobody would even finish the thing. You've got to have that drama. And yet, when Shakespeare made Iago or any one of the villains in his plays, was he therefore a villain because he did that? No. And I know I've done maybe 500 blog articles over the years, and then this book recently, and I know enough about writing to know, as great authors have all said, that when in fact, there's a story about Charles Dickens, and I've read most of his books when I was young, but he created, there was one character in one of his books who, in the novel, the character died. And Dickens was weeping because authors will tell you that once the energy starts flowing, the authors lead their own lives. They take on their own attributes and qualities, just as we do. And so it is that in the great drama of life, without that juxtaposition of happiness and sadness and tragedy and so forth, you know, when you tell stories to your friends, do you tell them about the church picnic where everything was perfect? No, you tell them about the, the airplane flight that went to hell or whatever it was. In other words, Swami tells a delightful story, Swami Kriyananda. He was in Carnegie Hall, I think it was, or maybe the one in Washington, D.C., I forget. And no, it was Carnegie Hall. And he was sort of a little bit like Mark back there. He was kind of a technology guy, an Atlantean. So that day, somewhere in New York City, he always had a fascination with these little gadgets. And not that he was very good at it, but he bought this little portable dictation device. And so, because, he was a teacher, and anyway, so he goes to Carnegie Hall to watch this symphony, listen to this symphony, and he's right in the middle of it, and the conductor stops between whatever you call those things, and he says, I wonder how this records, in a big symphony. So he presses the button, testing, 1, 2, 3, and the conductor whirls around, and it's just, but in this embarrassing moment, he's thinking to himself, I have a great story. Right? So that's how it is for us. I mean, we have our tragedies, some within ourselves and others greater that we participate with other people. But as I like to tell my fellow teachers, especially when I'm training teachers, I say, it's all about getting good stories in life. So, that's what it is. It's a great story, a great drama that each one of us live in. It doesn't satisfy the heart because there is suffering in this world. And in that sense, the God within us suffers too. When somebody was nailed to a cross, the purpose of that really is to show us how to deal with our tests. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus, a very real human being, but God realized a concatenation, if you will, of the human and divine consciousness that is our destiny, each one of us. He knew what was coming. He prayed, let this cup pass. He was no fool. He was willing to give it a miss, all right. But immediately he said, thy will be done. And in that gave to us a great lesson, because it must needs be that the tragedies that come to our life, difficulties and so forth, must come. We cannot get out of it. We would, as I say, we couldn't endure unending so-called human happiness. We couldn't possibly endure it. And so it's a necessary part. We would never ask that question, why, if it weren't for the challenges in our lives and in the world around us. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, the yogi feels the pangs and sorrows and joys of all beings. And so it's not enough to have that wonderful life that maybe sometimes happens for some people. Have a victorious life, it's not enough to have an easy. Yogananda said an easy life is not a victorious life. And the badge of our victory is the badge that comes from how we deal with carrying our crosses, whatever those may be. Sometimes it's our relationships, very often in fact. Sometimes it's our body and our health. Very often it's that as well. Sometimes it's just, not being able to find a job, not being satisfied in the work, or sometimes it's the anguish with seeing what's happening in the world, the unhappiness, the corruption, the violence. It makes absolutely no sense when we reach our own center. But this is a school. We come here to graduate. There's nothing wrong with the world. Now, in former times, the only way to become spiritual was to go in a monastery or go in a cave, to reject the world. God didn't make the world and make it as beautiful as it can be and life as it can be for us to reject it. That was perhaps necessary in former times, according to the consciousness of those times. But especially we here, we look around and we see the beauty of the earth. We see the majesty of the creation. And we naturally want it to be a little bit better than it is. That's only natural, because perfection is wired within us. But it's important for us to come to some, if not peace, at least some reconciliation with the fact that, well, I'm thinking, of course, of politics, or ecology and climate, all these things that we face in the world. I don't mean we come to peace with it, necessarily, but we have to reconcile that. Well, as somebody once said to Anandamoyi Ma, the great woman saint in India, and he was complaining, I think this was in the 1920s or something, about whatever the issues were in those days, and they had theirs too. Mother, how can we solve the issues of this world? And she said, this isn't your world. Don't you think that she who created this world knows how to operate it? Well, my answer to that is I'm not so sure, but most days I'm more apt to complain how the show is running. Yogananda would complain to Divine Mother from time to time, and you created us, you have to free us, because there's a lot of truth to that, we have our own problems. In other words, our own likes and dislikes and our own little addictions or whatever habits. But apart from how we've personalized the Leela, the duality of this world, much bigger than us. You think of the attraction of all sorts of things, through the senses and status, money, power, etc. Those are bigger than us. I appreciate the fact that in the 12-step recovery movement, you go through your different 12 steps, one of which, if you don't know, is meditation, by the way. But in one of those, you sort of hit rock bottom and you realize the need for a higher power. I don't particularly care for the fact that people go into these meetings and say, I'm an addict or I'm an alcoholic. And that affirmation is nice to outgrow. But nonetheless, when you suffer in those ways, you have to come to some honesty is a big issue with addiction, okay, secrecy, if those of you who may know a little bit about that. So at some point you need to get self-honest and so forth and know that you need a higher power. And so it is that quite apart from our own issues, there is a greater power, a satanic power. Yogananda said that I add my testimony to those of all the great saints, East and West, that Satan is real. Not a guy with a red suit and, horns or whatever, not so much that. But all the great saints, Buddha, St. Anthony, Jesus Christ, all testify that when the soul when the soul is about to be liberated, about to be realized, Satan actually can, as in the case of Buddha, for example, or Jesus Christ, can take human form. Because the satanic power outflowing of Om to create this incredible universe is personal in every one of us. It's a conscious force. It's not like, electricity or something. And so he acknowledged that. And so there is a force bigger than us. But the solution, the good news, is that we are bigger than us. That there is a greater force that draws us back within. And so like today when the reading says, many are the pathways to truth, there's, in a way, we each have our own religion. And that greater force that I'm referring to expresses itself uniquely through each one of us. We can come together here, or people can come together next door in the Baptist church or any number of places. But if you look around carefully, if we were to share our stories individually, we'd be so different. So you'd say, what are you doing here? It's like, it's unique. Yogananda said something that I found interesting because, you know, in the West, in the Abrahamic faith, the goal is to go to heaven. Okay. And in heaven, I guess you strum harps. You know, I don't mind guitars and harps, but I don't think I could do that for an eternity and really, you know, get off on it, as we used to say in the 60s. So the ego remains in certain faith traditions, and in some of the non-duality, some of the more complicated things in India too, this idea that we remain. Yogananda sort of brought those together. He said it this way: yes, in God the ego expands and merges into the infinite spirit. But in the infinite spirit, nothing is ever lost. Because that instinct for survival that's embedded within us is not just some Darwinian, some biological thing. It's deeply embedded consciousness to survive. And so when we achieve moksha, liberation, which goes way beyond just strumming harps in heaven, which is, you know, probably exists too, I'm thinking. But anyway, when we merge into that, the life that has been you and I through many incarnations, everything exists. I mean, what's infinity if it's not everything, right? So all the lifetimes we've led all remain in the infinity of the Spirit. That's how and why great saints and great devotees have had visions of people who lived long ago, Krishna and Buddha and Rama and Jesus and so on and so forth, because the reality of those forms and the uniqueness of our souls, that uniqueness is stamped from the moment of our birth in infinity. We are as old as God because we are children of God. And so many are those pathways because we're stamped with a unique, indelible identity. And it's not the personality. That's very hard to distinguish. I've spent a lot of years trying to figure out how that can be. I guess I just have to wait till I get there and somebody will explain it to me. But it's a wonderful drama that we have the opportunity. The angels in heaven, it says, the devas all seek mortal birth, because it's on this plane that the drama of creation was destined to enact itself. It's the great Leela of hide and seek. We're here to unmask the man behind the curtain, if you know your Wizard of Oz movie, okay? We're here to unmask the spirit behind ourselves, behind this personality in this form, but behind all creation. This is the great teaching of Sanatana Dharma, the great perennial philosophy that's taught really, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. That statement of oneness, that understanding that there is but one reality in this world, and it's the Spirit behind all creation. The Christ consciousness is the indwelling Spirit in creation. The Spirit Father beyond creation dwells in that sort of land of pure bliss. But within each atom of creation is that Christ, that Krishna, that Spirit, the only begotten of the Father beyond, reflected in every atom, every heart of creation, is that still witness of the creation, which itself is the vibratory presence of God in the Divine Mother, that Mother out of whose womb this great infinity of creation is made manifest. And in her womb, secretly hidden, invisible, is that same intention to create, which is why we procreate, that same intention to enjoy the creation, which is why we seek to enjoy the creation. But we forget who the Creator is. We mistake the creation for the goal and the purpose of the creation. That's why sin is really error. It's a mistake. We make a mistake. We mistake ourselves as being separate. And the path to inner freedom is the awakening of that Christ within us, that Krishna within us, that spirit, that reflection of God that is born in the humble manger of our hearts, in the darkness of meditation, behind closed eyes, in the stillness of our own soul, is the peace reborn. And bit by bit, particularly in the inner path where we meditate and become still each day, then that pathway to truth, unique as it is to us, many are the pathways, is reborn and lives within ourselves. We are greatly blessed. And I'm greatly blessed to be here. Thank you.
Let's have a moment of silence. And we'll have our offering now. Maybe here you can do the offering.
Take your hands to offering, hold it in your right hand. Please pray with me. Divine Mother,
Divine Mother,
we offer to thee
we offer to thee
the fruit of our labors.
the fruit of our labors.
Bless this offering,
Bless
This offering,
that it serve as a channel of thy light
that it serve as a channel of thy light
to truth-seeking souls everywhere.
to truth-seeking souls everywhere.
Om.
Om. Peace.
Amen.
Amen.
We'll have a song here. Should I turn mine on? Okay, we will. Listen, listen, whispering within your soul, hints of laughter, hints of joy, sweet songs of sadness, of quenchless yearning for the light, for my love, your true home. Long your heart has played the dancer, long you've toyed with nearest shadows of the treasures left behind you, deep in your soul. Long you plumbed the dark for answers, long you've begged from beggars' empty hands, gifts of life they too were seeking, gifts none could share. Friend, how long will you wander? Friend, as long as you seek your home in a land where all are strangers, love blocks her door. Leave to the weak his craven life, to the coward leave his dreaming. Oh, my saint, wake up, reclaim the light, seek the truth behind all seeming. Leave to the weak his craven life, to the coward leave his dreaming. Oh, my saint, wake up, reclaim the light, seek the truth behind all seeming. Turn, turn, turn within, in silence of soul, in cave of love. few announcements here, and then we'll go into our Festival of Light. Oops, okay. After this wonderful weekend, it's a hard act to follow, for sure, but we do have some things happening. We're going to have a sound healing workshop in October. I think it's the 19th, it's that Saturday. Sundari is going to conduct that again, and if you haven't partaken in that, it's a wonderful morning, hour and a half of just listening to all the different beautiful astral-like sounds that she creates with her instruments, and it's always been a blessing for us to have her and have her share that way. So that's on our website. We also have, in a very short time, just around the corner, Nayaswami Pranaba is coming, and he will be conducting a Kriya retreat. There will be some public programs, but it's mainly for Kriya bonds. We do have, 4 new Kriya bonds that will be taking Kriya, and that is not on our website yet, but will be as soon as this weekend is over. But there will be a Friday night public program, and then of course he'll be giving Sunday service. Let's see,
It's all here.
yeah, it's all here. Yeah, everything's in the Sangha house. We also are going to have a garage sale. That's one of our fundraisers. I think it's the 26th of October. So after this weekend, start to go through your things and think about what you might want to contribute to our garage sale, and also to participate, because it is a big energy, but it's also a way we share with our neighbors. We met so many of our neighbors last year when we did that, and it's a good fundraiser for us. So that's at the end of October. After service today, we would like to invite everyone to come get a picture with Hriman, because Padma would like to have that, and we would like to have that too. Padma, his wife, couldn't join him this time. So please come forward afterwards. We'll have a few snacks, but we are tending to go out for lunch at a restaurant, an Indian restaurant called Curry Bliss. It's at Coit and Beltline. So just Beltline's the next big road up, and you just go that way, and there's a shopping center on the left, but you can look it up, I'm sure, with your GPS. Curry Bliss. Anything else that anybody can think of? I think that's it for now. Our Raja Yoga is continuing this coming next Saturday. Mike will be leading the class on the Yoga Sutras and the yamas and niyamas, and we welcome people. There's a small group that is doing every week, but you can attend. You do have to register the individual classes as well, so we invite you to that. And any community members who have taken it before can certainly join. It's always nice support, and we all go deep together. So,
The Kriya meditation?
Kriya meditation
First
is
Saturday,
this coming Saturday, the next Saturday, right? Yeah. So that's
In
for Kriya
person
bonds
and
only.
online.
Yeah. It's for Kriya bonds only. It's here and online. So, all right. And now we'll have our Festival of Light. Where did our podium go to?
Right behind
Oh,
you.
there it is. Okay. There you go.
Festival of Light is written by Swami Kriyananda many years ago in the 80s in a seclusion near Assisi, Italy, the home of St. Francis. So let us lift up our hearts in a festival of light. The essence of this ceremony has been passed down since ancient times. O waves that we are on the bosom of the infinite sea, joyfully together let us celebrate our own greater reality. For now, by God's grace, our redemption is at hand. The promise has been given. The divine light, returning anew to earth, has given us power, as the Holy Bible proclaims, to become the sons of God. Into our hands have been given the sacred keys of awakening. Abundant now is our hope, for the Lord, through the Bhagavad Gita, promised even the worst of sinners, by steadfast meditation on me, speedily comes to me. Again, in that holy scriptures, he declared, even